Which rook should you sacrifice in a chess exchange sacrifice? Imagine you're in the middle of a game and suddenly you see an opportunity to give up a rook to gain a big advantage. It might seem risky at first, but in the right position, an exchange sacrifice can turn the tide of the game. The key question is which rook to give up. Should you sacrifice your rook on the king's side or the queen's side? The answer depends on the position and your overall strategy. First, think about activity and placement. Usually, you want to sacrifice the rook that is less active or less useful at that moment. If one rook is stuck behind pawns or not participating in the attack, that's often the better choice. If your rook is already well placed on an open file or attacking key squares, keep it. The goal is to remove the rook that isn't contributing much to your plans. Next, consider king safety. If sacrificing a rook helps expose your opponent's king or removes a defender that's protecting it, that sacrifice can be very effective. For example, if your rook can help open lines toward their king, it might be worth giving up the rook that's less involved in defending your own king. Pawns also play a role. If your pawn structure favors one rook, say you have open files that only one rook can use, then that rook is more valuable. Sacrificing the rook that has no open file or is blocked by pawns makes sense. On the other hand, if your rook is controlling important open lines, it's better to keep it. Piece placement and coordination are important too. If your minor pieces, knights and bishops, are active and can dominate after the sacrifice, then removing the less useful rook can create a powerful attack. Conversely, if your rook is needed to defend your king or control critical squares, it's better to keep it. In the middle game, exchange sacrifices are often used to weaken the opponent's pawn cover or eliminate a key defender. For example, sacrificing a rook to open a file against their king can lead to a decisive attack. Sometimes, removing a defender like a knight or bishop with a rook sacrifice can clear the way for your pieces to penetrate their position. Top players have shown that exchange sacrifices are not just about material but about changing the game's dynamics. They often give up a rook to gain activity, open lines, or create weaknesses in their opponent's position. If the sacrifice leads to a strong attack or positional advantage, it's usually worth it. But remember, not every position calls for a rook sacrifice. Always evaluate if the move will give you a clear benefit. If sacrificing a rook doesn't improve your position or create threats, it's better to keep your material intact. To decide which rook to sacrifice, look at activity, king safety, pawn structure, and how well your pieces are working together. If the rook is less active or less needed for defense, that's likely the one to go. If sacrificing it opens lines toward the enemy king or destroys their pawn cover, that's a good reason to do it. In the end, choosing which rook to sacrifice is about understanding the position and your strategic goals. It's a tool to turn a material deficit into a stronger, more active position. When used correctly, exchange sacrifices can be a powerful weapon in your middle game arsenal. Always think ahead, calculate carefully, and look for ways to maximize the impact of your remaining pieces after the sacrifice.